have massive goals and I want to make a huge impact in this world and with people around the world, but I can't do it unless I'm in a strong place myself. The goal is to end poverty. We're talking extreme poverty, which are those living on less than $2 a day. Unfortunately, out of 8 billion people around the world, we have a very high percentage of people living in that category. We have had unprecedented contraction and growth in the last 3 years, given the pandemic, given so many other externalities that the aviation industry has had to face. So what we identify in our frontline employees, which make the amalgam and essentially the majority of our employee base at Delta Airlines, very diverse, very incredibly diverse.
Hi all, good morning. So today I have a very special guest who was also my professor during my undergrad years. Nikki Eberhardt is a business professor at Minerva University and a member of Delta Airlines Global Talent Team. She has a PhD in global sociology, a master's in international development, and she's an Oxford graduate. She has held executive positions with startups and is currently the EVP Impact for eThree, which is developing a digital platform that connects influencers, brands, charities with Generation Z to promote social and environmental change. She's all about change. Whenever I reach out to her, she's always in a different country making an impact, which is very inspiring. Let's welcome Professor Nikki Eberhardt on 10 Minutes of Hiring Wisdom, where she will tell us about what she's been up to, what she's learned along the way, and her journey of making such a big impact. Hi, Professor. How are you doing?
I'm well, Manal. It's so nice to be with you again.
It is. So, Professor, I know that you're very big on impact. I would just like to understand the inspiration about where it came from.
It started with my father. My father came from a very disenfranchised set of experiences, and he always wanted me to remember that there were so many incredible people around the world who all deserved the same types of opportunities that I experienced. And so I had a chance to work with veterans from the United States. I worked with refugee populations. We actually did work in the prisons. And being raised in that way taught me that everyone had something important to say, that it was important to give them voice. And as I became an adult, I had the chance to live all around the world, experience different cultures, different types of sort of orientations to this world. And in so doing, I had the chance to say, wow, I want more of this. And I want to be connected to people in really meaningful ways. So that's where it began.
Okay, that is absolutely inspiring. Your father must be very, very proud of you, Pop, because I've seen some of the work that you've done, and it's absolutely incredible. I think which would lead me to my follow-up question, which is, when we're on a mission to make a difference, especially when we come across so many different cultures, you were working with a lot of refugee camps, you were working in prisons. It sometimes takes a toll on you where you find it hard. So how do you make sure that you still remain passionate about helping people, but not get too emotional where it impacts you as a person?
That's an excellent question. It's a hard balance to strike, but a crucial one. Self-care is necessary. It's important that very frequently you do a pulse check and say, am I okay? Am I feeling too emotionally invested? Am I taking care of my physical health? Are my relationships where they need to be? It's the reason why I took a recent leave of absence, because I wasn't in that position and things were impacting me in a very personal level. So I think when we do that, we say, this is a chance for recalibration, because at the end of the day, I'm just a person. I have massive goals and I want to make a huge impact in this world and with people around the world, but I can't do it unless I'm in a strong place myself. I was actually sitting at a fundraising dinner for a major university fairly recently. And next to me was a life coach who does a lot of executive work. And he said, Nikki, how are you doing? And I said, not so well. I'm feeling tapped out. And he said, let's talk about it. And after listening to me for about 10 minutes, he said, Nikki, you need to take care of yourself. He said, do you know how I start my day? I start by journaling. I start by meditating. And I get myself centered so that I can then give to maximum capacity to the world. He said, are you doing that for yourself? I said, no. And frankly, that has been the acceleration that I needed to make that pivot. So I'm not so good at it, but I definitely promote it really well to everyone, because in essence, I think we have to be strong ourselves in order to do what we want in the world.
Okay. I think first of all, kudos to you. I think a lot of people are afraid to take that leave of absence, especially women. So I'm glad you recognize that you want to spend time with your family, you want to take that break. And I'm sure, as in, like, it would have been very hard, but you realizing that, okay, this is a time where I take a step back, I take care of myself, and then when I'm actually fully at myself, the best position, that is when I can make a maximum impact in other people's lives. So thank you so much for sharing that, Professor. My next question, Professor, will be centered around your work. So can you talk to me about the work with Global Citizen and the impact that it's making in regards to the United Nations mission?
Absolutely. The goal is to end poverty. We're talking extreme poverty, which are those living on less than $2 a day. Unfortunately, out of 8 billion people around the world, we have a very high percentage of people living in that category. So, what do? We have a really strong business model that essentially says we need to pull together all the stakeholders in the space to amplify the message, to really garner the support we need from global citizens, to take them on their activist journey, coach them down that activist journey, and to get the funding where it needs to be in order to make those necessary changes. So we pull in celebrities, we pull in government heads of state, corporate CEOs, founders of organizations, um, so many different types of entities. We have music festivals, which music is the uniting force, right? It crosses cultural chasms. It supersedes political divisions, etc. With those music festivals, we have underlying objectives, and oftentimes they're around the important goals, the global goals that we have. And so as a result, we've been able to raise over $40 billion in the last decade and really garner so much support from millions of global citizens that are taking digital actions, encouraging their political leaders and others who surround them to be more accountable to people on the planet.
That is absolutely amazing. And I didn't know that the number was so big. I think when you start something, you're just like, okay, will I be able to do it? And the first step's usually the hardest. You were on this journey along with so many other people who wanted to make a difference, who had that vision of alleviating people out of poverty. And it was successful. People came together. There was different uniting forces, whether it was music, whether it was art. People were in it to make a difference in other people's lives. So thank you so much for sharing that, Professor. Professor, my next question for you would be is how is your experience like with Delta Airlines? What is your role there, and what is your most proudest achievement working with that company?
Oh, fantastic. I have an amazing team at Delta Airlines. It is a very diverse team, both in terms of geography as well as diversity of thought and orientation and so many different aspects of what it means to be a human. They bring together the best of what they have to create some amazing learning and development content and really helping to sort of enable leaders in our business to be the best they can. So we speak about empathy, we speak about servant leadership. We talk about what it means to innovate in effective ways. We talk about removing important silos that you often find in large organizations. And we coach them on that journey. So, what is my biggest accomplishment? Honestly, I would say we have had unprecedented contraction and growth in the last 3 years, given the pandemic, given so many other externalities that the aviation industry has had to face. And in those challenges, we found some really incredible opportunities. We have a very new workforce now, and many of our leaders are new. So, what does it mean to upskill your leaders? What does it mean to pull people from different sectors and different industries into the fold and essentially encourage them to take on the best of what we find in Delta leadership culture, but also to learn and innovate from what they bring to the table? So, these are constant conversations we have with our design team with our diversity, equity, inclusion teams. So many different areas in our group in order to create this really holistic learning and development opportunity and leadership development for these people.
Okay, well, that was going to be my follow-up question, which is that I know Delta is big on DEI. So how do you make sure that you attract diverse talent? I mean, statistically, in order for you to attract diverse talent, you need to make sure you already have an existing diverse team. But how do you retain that diverse talent? But how do you also make sure that the people that come and work with you are very diverse? Because differences can coexist and bring out the best of ideas. And I know that you're big on diversity with the work that you've done all over the world. So we'd love to understand your take on it, Professor.
Important question. It's important to get the terrible analogy intended, the 35,000-foot view, where you're at cruising altitude in an airplane and you look down and you say, "What's going on in this organization? What does a career pipeline look like? How do we encourage diverse candidates to apply to, executive leadership positions because we currently don't have that representation that we need?" And identify where those barriers are, where those gridlocks remain, and then targeting those in terms of the programs that you create. So I'll give you one illustration. My colleagues can speak better to this than I can, but they've been brilliant in creating a skills first approach. So what we identify in our frontline employees, which make the amalgam and essentially the majority of our employee base at Delta Airlines, very diverse, very incredibly diverse. And yet, we don't see that reflected in the higher levels of leadership. And so we've tried to remove some of those barriers and we said, let's take some of those traditional sort of requirements, different terminal advanced degrees, for example, and say, let's focus on the skills that you've developed in your career journey and see where those apply. And by even removing those types of barriers in the interview process, we've been able to accomplish so much. We've also created new internship opportunities, um, an assortment of different ways that we've been able to sort of cut down those barriers and then place people in those positions where now they have a voice at the table and they're sitting in those decision-making circles at those board tables and they're saying, from my diverse perspective, I would actually do that thing just a bit differently. Let's talk about what that looks like and execute on it. And so, again, we're still making progress in that area, but we've actually put money towards those programs that are going to help facilitate that change we need and separate those barriers from our frontline to our commercial teams.
Well, I think it's very important for everyone to have a voice on the table. And clearly, Delta recognize that, which is why it's taking initiatives coming up with such strategies to retain and attract the best talent when it comes to the strategy. So thank you so much for sharing that, Professor. Professor, last question. The year of 2023 is set to be hard. The economy is supposed to be in recession. Currently, some people are saying that we are in recession. Some people say that it will hit hard soon. So what is one piece of advice that you might have for job seekers out there during the year of 2023 that could help them during these hard times?
So important. I think there are many hacks that we'll have to tap into in really being scrappy, remaining connected in terms of, speaking to ourselves as individuals. What does that look like in the workforce? We need to be scrappy. We need to maintain our networks. We need to learn to do more with less. What do I mean by that? Budget. For example, if you're on a marketing team, you can assume you're likely going to have a smaller budget than you have in years past. What does that look like? How does that translate? Well, the workforce you have, you'll have to leverage more effectively. How can you make processes more efficient? What can you do to automate where necessary? Do you have the right processes that are maximizing the skill levels? Are you fearful to move people around within and across business units and divisions? If not, that could be the key to a lot of this. Creatively using the workforce that we have, maybe just in new and different ways. Maybe a lot of those folks that you're working with are less than satisfied anyway in the current roles they have. I know it's a novel concept, but what if we just ask them, what are your goals with this organization? How can we help you accomplish those things? And if they're a designer and it doesn't fit, they actually want to be a facilitator, then you help enable that shift to take place, right? And so you've again, you're breaking down these walls across business units and divisions in order to help the workforce move around in ways that'll keep them satisfied, lower attrition, ultimately with the organization, and maximize the impact they can be playing in your organization. So I'd suggest doing all of those things in a tight 2023.
I love that. I think it's interesting because a lot of companies are laying off people, but when usually you go through bigger companies, they will be laying off people, but then they'll have 2,000 job openings. And a lot of people have been saying like, oh, why couldn't you move these people around? I'm pretty sure different people could wear different hats and do those jobs when the times are hard. So rather than laying off people, just make use of what you have then rather than hiring other people. And so I love that you mentioned that, Professor, because we are definitely seeing that trend. Other than that, Professor, our time is up. It was a pleasure having you as a guest, learning so much about you. I learned a lot from you during our business classes, but I think the most important learnings that I took away from you were during your long conversations after class hours where we used to talk about life. So thank you so much for coming on, for being a positive leader in a world where everyone just cares about themselves and the impact that you're making on so many people.
Oh, that's so kind, Manal. I feel the same way about you. You're making a massive impact in your own respective space. And I appreciate the expertise that you're also bringing because you're a pretty incredible person.